In the stillness of the river, Jesus teaches that only by calming the storms within can we truly see the reflection of our soul, loved, worthy, and at peace. The day had been long, one of those days where the heat of the sun and the dust of the road clung to their skin, where every step seemed heavier than the last. Jesus and his disciples had spent hours traveling from village to village, speaking with those who were eager to listen, healing those who were broken in body and spirit, and offering words of comfort to those weighed down by the struggles of life. But now, as the golden light of late afternoon bathed the landscape in warmth, the weariness of the day began to settle in. The disciples, though devoted, were tired. They had followed Jesus with unwavering faith, but the demands of their journey often left them physically and emotionally exhausted. It wasn't just the miles they had walked or the work they had done, it was the weight of the responsibility, the uncertainty that loomed in their hearts, and the challenges they faced in their own souls. Each disciple carried something within them, fear, doubt, pride, or guilt, that often made the road ahead seem harder than it should be. As they walked in silence, following Jesus down a narrow path away from the crowds, none of them knew exactly where they were headed, but they trusted their teacher. He always knew where to lead them, and there was always a purpose, even when they didn't understand it at first. They had learned that the journey with Jesus was not just a journey across land but a journey of the heart. Eventually, the path led them through a grove of olive trees, their branches whispering softly in the breeze. The air was cooler here, and the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves brought a moment of relief to their tired bodies. Still, there was a heaviness that lingered, a sense that something more was needed, something beyond physical rest. After a few more steps, they arrived at the edge of a wide, calm river. Its waters were crystal clear, reflecting the deep blue of the sky, the towering trees that lined its banks, and the soft colors of the setting sun. The disciples paused, looking at the river in quiet awe. It was as though the stillness of the water invited them into a moment of reflection, a moment to breathe and simply be. Jesus motioned for them to sit, and they did so without hesitation, grateful for the chance to rest. The cool grass beneath them and the soft sound of the river's gentle flow began to ease the tension in their bodies. They sat together in a semicircle around Jesus, the river in front of them, the sky stretching above them, and for the first time in hours, a sense of peace began to settle over them. The disciples watched as the surface of the water remained undisturbed, perfectly still, like a mirror reflecting the beauty of the world around it. They could see the trees, the sky, and even their own faces faintly reflected in the water. But even in the tranquility of the moment, there was a sense of anticipation. Whenever Jesus gathered them like this, there was something important to be learned, something deeper than the day's events. For a long while Jesus said nothing. He simply gazed at the river as if lost in thought, but the disciples knew that he was always aware of them. His silence wasn't empty, it was full, inviting them into a space of reflection. Finally, Jesus spoke, his voice soft yet full of authority, as though his words carried the weight of the very earth beneath their feet. "Look at the river," he said, gesturing toward the calm waters. "Tell me, what do you see?" The disciples glanced at one another, uncertain of what to say. What was there to see? It was a river, beautiful, yes, but what more was there to notice? Peter, always the first to speak, offered the most obvious answer. "We see the river, Master," he said, his voice tinged with a bit of confusion. "And our reflection in it?" Jesus smiled softly, his eyes warm and understanding. "Yes," he said, "your reflection. But look closer. What do you notice about the reflection when the wind blows or when something disturbs the water?" The disciples turned their attention back to the river. A light breeze stirred the surface of the water, causing their reflections to ripple and distort. Their faces, once clear, were now blurred, broken by the movement of the water. John, who was always contemplative and gentle, was the first to speak. "The reflection becomes unclear," he said quietly. "It's hard to see what is real." Jesus nodded, his gaze still fixed on the water. "The river is like your soul," he said. When it is calm and still, you can see yourself clearly. You see the truth of who you are, the beauty, the flaws, the hopes, and the fears. But when the waters are stirred by the winds of life, by fear, by anger, by pride, or by doubt, your reflection becomes distorted. You can no longer see yourself as you truly are. The disciples fell silent, each one processing his words in their own way. They had all experienced the inner turmoil he was speaking of. There were times when their hearts were so troubled, their minds so restless, that they couldn't see the truth about themselves or the world around them. They knew the feeling of looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back. Peter, who had often acted impulsively, spoke next. His voice was laced with a hint of frustration, perhaps at himself more than anyone else. But Master, how do we calm the waters of our souls? How do we find peace when life is so uncertain? There's so much we don't understand, so much we can't control. Jesus turned to Peter, his expression full of compassion. "It is not the absence of the storm that brings peace, Peter," he said. "It is the presence of faith. When you trust in God's love, when you surrender your fears, your need to control, and your anger, the waters within you will calm. And in that stillness, you will see yourself as God sees you, beloved, worthy, and forgiven. The peace you seek is not found in the world's circumstances but in the quiet of your heart when it rests in God." Peter lowered his head, his heart heavy with the weight of his own failings. He had always been quick to act, quick to speak, and often quick to regret. He longed for that peace Jesus spoke of, but it felt so elusive, especially in the face of his own weaknesses. Sensing Peter's struggle, Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder, his touch gentle yet firm. "You are not defined by your failures, Peter," he said quietly. "The storms that rage inside you do not change who you are. Beneath the surface, beneath the wind and the waves, the river remains. Your true self remains, loved by God, even when the waters are troubled." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow, they were tears of release, of relief. For so long, he had carried the weight of his own imperfections, afraid that his flaws would overshadow the love and purpose Jesus had called him to. But now, hearing these words, he felt a deep sense of peace begin to take root in his heart. As Peter wiped his eyes, another voice broke the silence. It was Thomas, the one who often struggled with doubt, who wrestled with questions that seemed to have no easy answers. "Master," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I want to believe. I want to have that peace you speak of. But sometimes, it feels like the doubts inside me are stronger than my faith. How can I find stillness when my mind is always filled with questions?" Jesus looked at Thomas with eyes full of understanding. "Faith is not the absence of doubt, Thomas," he said gently. "It is the willingness to trust even when the path ahead is unclear. Doubts will come, but they do not have to disturb the waters of your soul. When you place your trust in God's love, you will find that the questions don't need answers all at once. In the stillness, you will discover that God is with you, even in your uncertainty." Thomas lowered his head, his heart heavy with the weight of his own doubts. He had always questioned things, always needed answers, clarity, certainty. But Jesus' words reached into the deepest parts of his soul, offering him a peace that went beyond understanding. Perhaps faith wasn't about having all the answers. Perhaps it was about trusting that God was with him, even when the questions remained. Mary, who had been sitting quietly, listening to the exchange with tears streaming down her cheeks, spoke next. Her voice, though soft, carried the depth of her emotions. "Master," she said, her voice trembling, "if we are to see ourselves clearly, we must first find that stillness within. But how do we do that when the world around us is so full of noise, so full of distractions?" Jesus turned to her, his gaze tender, as though he could see the very depths of her soul. "Yes, Mary," he replied. "But there is more. When you look into the river, you do not see only your own reflection. You see the sky, the trees, and the people standing beside you. In the same way, the state of your heart affects those around you. If your heart is troubled, full of anger or fear, that disturbance will ripple out and affect others. But if your heart is at peace, your peace will become a blessing to those around you. The stillness within you will reflect love, compassion, and grace. Just as the calm river reflects the beauty of the world around it, tears welled up in the eyes of the disciples as they listened to Jesus' words. The truth of what he said resonated deeply within them. They had all experienced the ripple effect of their own inner turmoil, how their impatience, frustration, or doubt had spread to others, causing division or hurt. But now they understood that the opposite was also true. If they could find peace within, they could spread that peace to others. The golden light of the setting sun reflected off the water, casting a warm glow on the faces of the disciples. Peter, always the most passionate, felt a lump rise in his throat. For so long he had been hard on himself, quick to act, quick to speak, and quick to regret. He often feared he would never live up to the call Jesus had placed on his life. But now, hearing Jesus speak of peace and stillness, he felt a deep sense of hope. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about trusting in God's love, even in his imperfections. Jesus stood, the soft breeze stirring his hair as he gazed lovingly at his friends. "You are like this river," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Life will bring its challenges, and there will be moments when the waters within you are troubled. But beneath every storm, beneath every ripple, the river remains. Your true self remains. And when you allow God's love to calm your soul, you will see yourself clearly again, as I see you now. Beautiful. At peace." Final message from Jesus. Let the river remind you, my beloved friends, that peace within brings clarity to your life. And when your heart is still, you will see yourself and others with the love and grace that God has for you. Trust in that stillness, for it is in the quiet places of your soul that you will find the reflection of your true self, full of love, full of light. The disciples left the river that day with their hearts forever changed. They understood now that peace was not something that came from outside but something that flowed from within. And as they continued their journey with Jesus, they carried the lessons of the river with them, through every storm, every doubt, every challenge, knowing that beneath the troubled waters their true selves remained. This is end of the story. Comment amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.